Geez, 1 second.
You shouldn't have told me that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a guide to an agile e-learning development process. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Kozera. I'm one of the directors of creative learning at a company called ELM Learning, and I'm joined by one of my amazing colleagues, Beth, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Beth. I am the QA lead and the accessibility lead at ELM as well.
All right, so for all of you digital learners out there and creators and subject matter experts, we're gonna share some of our tips that we have learned over the years. So a quick little overview of the company that we work for. So ELM is a creative agency that specializes in learning experiences. So a lot of the things that we do is in the digital world, creating digital learning experiences, understanding human-computer interactions, and a lot of kind of blended learning integration. So the process that we've adapted kind of fits to work in this digital environment, and particularly in the corporate space. So you'll see over the last 10 years, we've worked with a lot of clients. And over the years, we've learned a lot and we've made a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes have helped us kind of perfect our craft and perfect the process and help us to creating effective, intuitive, and appealing learning experiences. I'm just gonna stop my video real quick, just make sure everything's all right. All right, cool. So on that point of making a lot of mistakes, I want to talk about one of our first projects that we made here at ELM. It was for a government agency, and it was a course on corruption. And we won that contract. And based on that project overview, we just kind of hopped right into development, right? And we felt that we had the best idea, a great metaphor and approach. We were going to put animated videos and branching scenarios and gamification and custom characters and just the whole works, right? So we began developing and then spent many, many hours creating the course. And when it was done, we could not be happier. Everybody on the team felt really good. We were watching it over and over. We felt it was one of our masterpieces, and all was right with the world, or so we thought, because we ended up sending that course to the client, and we received an email right back with those 5 dreaded words you never want to hear from a client. And it was, "We need to talk now." So as you could imagine, that amazing elated feeling that we had from the beginning of this quickly changed to something more of the lines feeling something like this. And if you guys are in the learning space, I'm sure many of you have felt this position before, right? Because learning experience design is not for the faint of heart. So what happened? Where did everything go so horribly, horribly wrong? Well, this is when we learned one of our most important lessons when creating a collaborative custom learning experience, and that is you need to test your solution before execution. Great learning experience design needs to be intuitive, effective, and appealing, but most importantly, it needs to work for a specific audience and a specific culture, right? So there's a lot of different moving parts to create a great learning experience design. So when we say learning experience design, what exactly do we mean? And this is a definition that we find most applicable to the work that we do. The goal of a good learning experience design is to make sure that we're enabling the learners to achieve a desired outcome in a human-centered and goal-oriented way. It's different from a lot of the other design schools of thought, graphic design, web design, print design. There's a lot of different principles that go into it. But with learning experience design, it really needs to have this human-centered approach, but with a goal and an outcome in mind. And as you can see here on this chart, there's a lot of schools of thought that goes into creating a great learning experience. There's the human-centered part, understanding UI, UX, and the human-centered design and storytelling. There's designing for an objective and an outcome. There's understanding how to teach with a desired outcome and understanding and needing those skills. And then, of course, the psychology and the neurology besides how humans learn, our behavioral change, and what makes us retain information. So there's a lot of stuff there. And some of the key players that are involved in making a really good digital learning experience, of course, you have your subject matter experts, someone that's lived it and experienced it and very familiar with the content and has something that they want to teach to an audience. Then we have our instructional designers who are familiar with adult learning theory, content flow, creating a content outline, and really just understanding how do we formulate the instructions in a way that's intuitive and allows the learner to retain the information. Then we have our designers and our developers. These people are more specialized in the UI, UX side of things, visual communication, the different tools that are out there. And then depending on the type of project that you guys are working on, there could be some supporting roles: script writers, art directors, project managers, QA specialists. Really, the list is endless depending on what your outcome and what your goal is going to be. Okay, so now that we know just a little bit about LXD and we heard a little bit of our horror story in the beginning, let's kind of hop into our process. Now, an important process in developing this kind of collaborative environment is really focusing on feedback for the internal and the external teams and breaking up the project into manageable portions with specific goals to maximize success and minimize misunderstandings. So let's hop into this process overview. We have our kickoff, content analysis, look and feel and scripting, storyboarding, alpha, beta, and final. Now, when looking at this process, even though it seems linear, it's very agile because each one of these stages has a specific goal in mind and a specific person who's accountable for reaching that goal. And each one of these has a handoff that feeds into the next one. And if something's not working, we kind of just move back to the next stage. And each one of these blocks represent a very specific part of this project that needs to be approved and move slow, right? So we start kind of high level and then move into this process. Beth, if you're still with me, is there anything else you wanted to add here?
Yeah, well, one of the things is, as Greg was saying, we're kind of more of an agile process. And how that works is, for example, when the LXD team is working on the scripting and content analysis, the designers are already starting to work on the storyboarding phase, because they're looking more at how it will be visually presented. So they're kind of focused on how to do that framework, and they'll be fed the content, as the time goes on. So that's part of the process that, how we work.
Excellent, thanks, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to be doing next is just kind of hopping into each one of these blocks and talking about what goes on and how we develop this culture and accumulate a good feedback loop, a positive feedback loop with all of the internal teams, all the key players, as well as the client you're designing for, right? This is coming from, you as the creator creating the course. So first, and most importantly, we start with our kickoff. And the kickoff is the check-in before takeoff, right? So if you think you're about to go on a space adventure, you want to make sure you got all your supplies. You want to make sure you know where you're going. You want to make sure you got everybody on board and all the skills required so you don't get lost in space like the Robinsons. So the most important thing in this kickoff is alignment, right? Before we start anything, as the creator, working with the client and everybody on board, we first want to understand, of course, the learner. When we say learner experience design, that's the user here. We want to understand as much as we can. We want to create maybe an empathy map. We want to know any of their feedback on previous courses, some frustrations, pain point, motivators, even just maybe how they speak to one another or different apps they use and just what they're comfortable with and their demographics. The more information that we have about the user at first plays into every other role that we're going to see in the phases to come. Next, it's also important to understand the business, the culture, understanding why they're doing this training now, what is the objective, any kind of success metrics that they're looking to hit, What is their culture? How do they talk to one another? How do they dress? What are the tools that they use internally? And of course, in learning experience design, we're always designing for outcomes and for objectives. So what are some of these intended objectives we're looking to hit? Making sure that we know, everybody knows at this, what we're looking to do. Very important is the technology. And you know, it's good to look at technology as what is the technological infrastructure, but really the restrictions in place. So different companies might have different LMSs, different operating systems. Are we going mobile? Are we going desktop? Are we doing blended learning? What are the steps that it takes inside of their LMS to find some of this learning, right? Because we just want to understand all of this to make sure that whatever solution we're building is effective and works, right? You could have the greatest course, you put it into an LMS, and then nobody could load it up on their operating system. Project stakeholders, sometimes beyond just the client, there are people that have a stake in this project, and they're gonna, you know, have some opinions, and we want to make sure, is it legal department? Is there a CEO or a VP's initiative that they're looking to hit? What is their goals out of this? And really understanding how are their opinions and their goals going to affect the overall project. And then finally, of course, the budget, the timeline, and the overall strategy that we're going to take place, what tools we're going to use, what modalities. So from here, this is all this kind of intake for this kickoff and making sure that everybody on the project understands all of these key points. So a kickoff is successful, and we move on to the next stage, of course. Simply put, when everybody is aligned on the process, the timeline, and the strategy for the project. So now that we know what we're going to do, now we have the objectives, the learner outcomes, and we got a pretty good understanding of all the resources that are going to be involved in putting together this learning experience. We need to now set up these phases to come. And this is something I'll kick over to Beth that she does very well for us, of just making sure everybody knows what they're doing and when they're going to be doing. So Beth, I'm going to kick this next slide over to you.
Sure. So one of the things that we do is the PM will set the project up in a couple different places. One of the places that we use is Slack. So we'll create a Slack channel for that project, and all the members of the team will be on that channel so we can communicate. And we also set up zipBoard, which is our bug tracking tool, both internally and externally. And so the PM will be in here creating that project. Go ahead, next slide.
You got it.
And when the project gets started, what the PM does is they will set up what the phases are that are going to be used for that particular project. So not every project follows the same kind of path. Some clients will have just alpha to final. Others will go alpha, beta, final. Sometimes we'll have the storyboard in here as well. So it's a varied set of processes that we follow here. But getting it set up correctly, this allows us to better manage all of the issues that come in, and we can show progress and burn down and all of those things that the executive team would want to know as well. So next slide. And one of the nice things about zipBoard is when you set things up, it isn't a strict kind of pre-made environment. When you're adding a phase, you have the flexibility to create as many phases as you want. You can name them whatever you want. This is the window in which you create the phase. You can see it's very open and very easy to use. So we love this thing. So next slide.
All right, perfect. So the reason setting the project up in those phases are so important is really to what you're going to see later on is you want to get effective feedback. You want to make sure that you understand exactly what's missing from whatever role or whatever department is looking at the project. So now that our project's all set up, we're ready to go. We have all the information and the intake from the kickoff. We're going to hop into that content analysis phase. And the content analysis phase has a couple different touch points to make sure that, again, we're hitting our goals. And if those of you that have been doing this for a while, you first start with your content review. So content could come in a lot of different forms. It could come in the form of a PowerPoint, videos, textbooks, and instructor-led training. It could all just live in somebody's mind. But based on some of those intended outcomes, we're going to go through the content and make sure that we have all the information that we're going to need to create that learning experience to make sure it's as effective as possible. And if there's anything missing, you know, a lot of times we have to do subject matter expert interviews, which, you know, at times can be wrangling cats. But if you have a strong content review and you really understand your gaps that you're missing, you could come to these interviews with very strong questions just to get the information that you need. Because sometimes, you know, subject matter experts, they know so much and they want to share so much information, but we want to make sure it's intended. And then, you know, the creative ideation phase, which is a really important part for the instructional designer and for your developer to get together and now look at the content and really start to see how we're going to develop this. And we want to make sure that whatever ideas the instructional designer has is doable in whatever the tool. So that's a really good symbiotic relationship touch point that you want to do here. Then we kind of create our content outline, which can just look in different forms. We currently use Google Docs. We have been experimenting with moving it over to a online whiteboarding tool that we use called Miroboard. But really now, here is now all of the content, how it's going to flow together, and an idea of what type of interactions or modalities that we're looking to use. And then we're going to go into a kind of QA and client review. And then Beth, is there anything kind of that you wanted to add here?
No, you hit it all.
Wonderful. So sometimes here, you know, you'll see in these kind of QA reviews here, it could kind of go back and forth, just depending on the QA knows the objectives. They're looking for any kind of mistakes, making sure that it's really good before we send to the client review. Now, we don't move to this next stage, and sometimes we kind of stay here and again, keep tweaking it, but we don't move until everybody's aligned with the client, I'm sorry, with the content flow, the learning objectives, and the topics. Then we're going to move into the script writing phase. So now the script writing phase is similar. Now they're going to review the content outline, but still become familiarized with all the information. And what's really important in this human-computer interaction world is that your script doesn't sound like a robot. Your script doesn't sound like you're reading a manual instructions. You really want it to sound, you know, similar to the way that I'm talking to you guys, a very conversational tone, but also the tone in which that we learn from the learner audience and the culture of whatever we're designing for. After we do the script writing, we put into a QA. And then we send it out for a client review. And this is important. We put 2 client reviews here because we really want to make sure that the information we are providing is communicated in such a way that their learners are going to understand it. So it comes back to us, we make some revisions and do QA again, send it back to the client, right? So now we're really kind of just focusing on the overall tone and how we're going to communicate this course. And from here, we don't move forward unless we're all aligned on the brand tone, the use of language, and just making sure that's going to resonate with the audience and accurately communicate the information. Next, this look and feel, right? Especially with a new client, it's very important. And this is your art director, your developer, really understanding the brand. And this look and feel creation is just, you know, 1 or 2 icons, your buttons. If there are characters, maybe 1 or 2 characters, what they're going to look like. What is the interface going to look like? But really just focusing on just a few things that once we get into the storyboard and the alpha, we already know that we don't have to worry about what things are going to look like and what buttons are going to go. So this phase could take the form of a PDF, or, depending on the tool that you're making, you could throw it right in the tool, but you really just want to align on these high-level user interface items to make sure that what we create is going to be desirable for the intended user. Great. And for this next stage, the look and feel goal, we just want to, again, make sure that we're all aligned. The visual aesthetics, look and feel on the brand. And now we could really start getting into how all of this is going to come together. So now we have the content and the flow. Now we have how it's all going to be written and how it's all going to be communicated. We have the visual style. And before you even get into developing, creating just even a really quick either text storyboard or just understanding how the visual treatment and the text is all going to come together, spending a little bit of this time up front will save you a lot of time, especially if you're looking at higher levels of effort. If it's animated video or virtual reality, whatever it is, you want to kind of do it in these thumbnails, just so it's a lot easier to collect that feedback and change that feedback without burning the budget. And in the storyboard phase, ideation. This is so important. Now, this is, again, with everybody. And we, use another collaborative tool here, which is an online whiteboarding tool, but getting the client on board, the designer on board, and the instructional designer to really just make sure everything is going to work together and get everybody aligned right here. Then we pass the assets over to the designer, creating the icons and the characters and whatever things that are going to be inside the course. And then we put together the storyboard. Now, before we send it to QA, it's important now for the instructional designer to really sign off on, yes, I believe that this is instructionally sound, and I like everything that I'm looking at. I feel good about it. Again, to QA and to client review. And Beth, is there anything?
Yes. So one of the things in this arena is where look and feel was being done. The storyboarding is also being done as well. And so those last three phases are pretty much staggered on top of each other. So you can kind of think that our phases are not really all that linear in this part of the process, but they are kind of layered on top of each other in a staggering kind of situation. When we do the QA in all of these phases, there is a lot of continual back and forth, as we go through these processes. So QA is typically starting relatively early in the process, and we just keep getting it built, stronger and more sound. So by the time it gets to the client, we're pretty assured that we're meeting all of the client objectives at this point. And Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of just wanted to see a couple of questions here. Even though this does seem, maybe some out there, maybe waterfall or agile, or, we've kind of adopted, and mixed this kind of agile, waterfall, and even kind of product development design. And each one of these stages are a sprint to get to this kind of finished goal, so to speak. But if something's not working right here in the storyboard, that's when we'll go back sometimes to, let's say, look at the content outline, make our edits there, and kind of move forward here. So the goal for each one of these stages are to kind of sprint and get to each section. And a lot of times, sometimes if things aren't working, we might be in the storyboard phase for a while, but it does kind of seamlessly, or in theory, seamlessly move forward to a lot of these next intended goals. And that's really kind of what we find to be really important, to make sure that we're hitting each one of these markers. And then, again, just we're now all aligned with the on-screen text, the graphics, the user experience, and the interaction of the design. And now we want to get right to the prototype, right? We want to build out an alpha for us to see. And this is now with the interactions laid out, and maybe not with all of the final design elements into it, but this is going to be the first chance that we really get to see this product come to life with all of the other pieces that we put together. So we take all that information from the storyboard, and as we move forward, we create this alpha phase, right? And again, like I was just saying before, this is just putting it inside of the tool, whatever it might be. But really just, we want to see how everything is going to work together. In our case, we have one of our art directors review this final alpha. And then it goes to the QA and to the client review. And now here is really where the feedback really starts coming in. And I think also to the point, this is where we start to get even a little bit more agile with the process, because now we've built this tool, and now it's very important to get, while getting the feedback, analyzing the feedback, making sure that it's effective for the course and it's going to help the course and what we're developing. So I'm going to kick this over to Beth right now to show kind of how we organize these tasks and how we collect feedback for this round to make sure that we don't get stuck in the development.
So one of the things that that we do, I mentioned about the PM setting up the phases and so forth in zipBoard, is now we're actually starting to use the product to review the module and bring up issues for the developer. And so this is what the task list looks like within the, within zipBoard. And it's easy for us to be able to, look at the issues and look at their priorities, look at the status. So QA, for example, when a developer believes it's fixed, they'll put it in the resolve fixed. And then when QA has tested, we'll say it's QA verified, or we reopen, or whatever the outcome is for that particular task. Next slide.
Yes.
So one of the cool things about this is that we can take that screenshot within the module. That screenshot actually becomes the main description part of the bug, and wherever we placed our pointer, we write up the issue, and the designer developer can, when they come into the bug, they can view it and they can see exactly where that issue is. And it makes it a much easier process for them to find it. And so it's a really good process, and we can go back and forth in these. We communicate with each other within the task as well. So excellent. Next slide. So, and let me, before you finish, one of the things that we do is, as this alpha phase is going off to the client for review, the developers have already started the beta phase. So, they are well on their way implementing what those changes are that are coming into the beta phase. So that is a very clean handoff. So by the time all of the client feedback comes in from alpha, the developers already has those fairly well implemented in the beta phase. So go ahead.
Excellent. And yeah, for our alpha goal here, we're looking to build that working draft and just really look at the functionality, the animation, the overall user experience. And I just want to let you guys all know, I see we have so many questions, and I love how engaged all you guys are. I'll try to get to them before this, and if not, I'll follow up in the comment here. And we also have a poll, and in that poll, just if you're looking for additional information, and I'd be more than happy to answer any of these questions. All right, so now when we finally get to the beta round, and Of course, after we've collected all this information, we move it a little bit more forward. And then, Beth, did you want to kind of just a quick overview of this round here?
So this is basically now our process from a QA perspective is repetitive from the other phases. As the developer is creating the module, we have kind of iterative reviews going forward until the issues are cleaned up or resolved. And once we hit a point where it's acceptable, then we send it on to the client for review. And we may or may not have more than 1 or 2 reviews with the client. It just depends on what we had agreed to as to how many rounds of client review. But in that whole process, again, as the client review process is in place, the developer is now working on the final.
Right, and then this is really now the phases that we really start to test, deploy, review, implement feedback. A lot of those early stages are some of those key pieces of information that you want to make sure you collect before you hop right into development. So it's kind of like starting slow, collecting information, and now getting to this point as quickly as we can, and now testing, deploying, and reviewing, and making sure that it's all coming together. But critical in that plan design stage in the beginning of this, when we look at the script writing, the storyboard, those pieces you really want to make sure are aligned before you really even invest the time in kind of developing the whole process, the project here.
And at this phase also is when the stakeholders begin to look at the module. So from a client perspective, they're now getting deeper input from within their organization. So when a client is reviewing it, they're able to submit bugs as well. They come into a different queue than what our internal bugs are. And so this is just a shot of what the client task list would look like. And once they come in, we review them to make sure they're not a duplicate of what has already been written up, making sure that it's a valid issue and those kind of things. And if it is a valid issue, then we will convert those into a task or a bug. And the ones that are on the screen right now, we have been created into bugs, because under actions, you can see that it says open task. So next one.
Yep.
So when you are reviewing the module, for example, the zipBoard product is just kind of an overlay on top of the browser window. And when you see an issue, you would either take a snapshot, which is the camera looking symbol in the upper right, or if it needs kind of like a video, you can take a video of the issue as well. So if you select snapshot, it'll take a snapshot. And can you go to the next slide? And once you're in the kind of the edit mode for the snapshot, you have different ways or methods that you can identify the issue, whether you want to put just a general comment, if you want to do a pointer, or you want to select it out, and you can then enter what the issue is. And then you can submit it. Once you're done submitting the issue, you go back to the browse view. And if you go to the next slide. So I've pointed out the issue, and I've identified it. I can select it out, and that's how it looks when the client wants to submit an issue. So next slide.
Great. And now, hopefully after the client has had it, they've tested it, Maybe they've showed it to some learners. We'll get some more feedback there, and then hop right back into it. And then hopefully at this stage, when we call the final is, when we could send out the project to go live to the full audience here. And again, just implementing some of the feedback that we received in the beta round. A lot of time the beta round is when some of the higher level execs or when some of the learners will get a chance to actually hop into it at this point. So yeah, and that's hopefully at this point, you're delivering a perfect module that exceeds client expectations and delights the end user. And of course, depending on the initiative, things could change. If the content's not so evergreen or if things get updated, you're always now looking to put out there, collect feedback, and see maybe in a phase 2 how we might reiterate or adapt to this. So we got some time here, and I want to kind of go through kind of some of these questions as I can. And if not, again, just I'll go through the comment, or there's a poll mentioned in the top right corner, and we can collect your information. We can hop into it. I saw some questions here about how long does something like this take? It seems like an endless amount of steps, and we work in a rapid environment. And so we too work in a very rapid environment, creating for different Fortune 500s. Usually they want it right away. So depending on how long the course is, something like this could take 3 weeks, right? Something like this could just take a couple of weeks. But what's really important, especially with starting with a new client here, is after let's say we're developing 15 courses that we need to get done. Starting small with one course and really just putting in the work into these upfront areas, right? After you develop other courses, you already have your look and feel, you already have your scripting. If you're building an articulate storyline, you'll have a template that you could use, and it saves a lot of time. So it can go from anywhere from like 3 weeks to 6 months, depending on how long. Sometimes if we're building a year-long onboarding course with multiple courses in the curriculum, it could take longer. But just kind of checking in with these most important parts before you really start to sprint and actually develop the product and getting it out there. Let's see here. Someone asked about the tool that we were using. zipBoard is the tool, and Miroboard is another tool that we use. And then as far as to developing the actual modalities, we use whatever tool the client comes to us with. So we do a lot of stuff in our articulate storyline, but we're an agency that has 100 projects going on at once. Each project has their own audience, has their own tool, has their own technology infrastructure, and the way that it manages internally, we use this project management philosophy called critical chain project management, CCPM, of just making sure, and that's where that zipBoard tool list is, making sure that every resource is freed up for the role that they're about to do while moving forward. And that's even the client as well. There are a lot of client reviews here. And sometimes it's less, but a lot of times when building for a company, the client needs to check in because some of the content is so specific to that company culture, right? It's their internal process and it does need to be right. So the client review cycles can definitely change depending on the complexity of the content that we're working with. Do you have a benchmark number for persons or hours of finished content? Again, it depends on the length of the course, but a 15-minute course, a look and feel could take a seasoned designer an hour, the scriptwriter, an hour as well. The content analysis, depending on the amount of subject matter interviews and the complexity of the interactions, could take 3 to 5 hours, let's say, if we're talking about just a 15-minute course, right? So it definitely depends. And then for the storyboarding and the alpha, you want to look at your levels of effort for each one of these stages. So even in the kickoff here, what is the level of effort required for the content? Is there a lot of gaps? Are we going to need to do some personal research? Really just understanding and outlining that up front. If the look and feel requires complex illustrations or medical illustrations, right, it's going to take a higher level of effort and more time. So really just understanding and agreeing on these different levels of effort and these different, complexity tiers will help you evaluate how much time is going to be spent and how long it's going to be spent, and just really making sure that, again, each resource is hitting their mark.
And it also depends, as Greg said, on the complexity of what they want. So some clients just want, a very simple module, and that speeds along quite quickly. We can get those out, in a week or maybe even less. There's others that give us an idea, and we have to try to come up with the content and come up with a complex design, a complex story that they want. And that can take a lot longer because there's a lot more creativity and work on the scriptwriter and LXD, as well as the art director. So as Greg said, it just really depends on the complexity, depends on the length of the module. We have some clients that come in that have an hour's worth of material that they would like to have put in now into an online e-learning module. And that takes a lot more effort. We have clients that, as Greg said, have a multiple series of modules that build on each other. And those efforts can go across several months to a year. But each one is measured, and as I said, it just kind of depends on the quantity and the complexity of the module.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more, so with some of our clients that we've been working with for a long time now, there was a time where the name of the game was getting out as many of these courses as we possibly could, and they were these short 5-minute micro lessons. And we really had to implement a process where the client and ourselves as the vendor or the creator really had to come together and figure out a process that we all kind of work together and follow. And we eventually got to the point where we were cranking out, I think 30 to 35 courses a week. But the client was really making sure they knew that, okay, this is how the content needs to be put together and this is how we need to deliver it. We're able to kind of create some of these templates and put it out there because they really wanted to get the courses out there quickly in front of the audience and make sure that we could adapt and change pretty quickly. So again, like you said, we're in this world of custom, right? Where different companies, different cultures, different learners, different content. It's really important to kind of understand all of these segments to implement them correctly for each audience, right? I always look at it again like, we're traveling to different planets, and every planet has a different type of learner, culture, speaker, and we really need to understand all of these things before we even get into building it. But once we kind of have a solid feel there, that's when you really kind of get into a rapid sprint developing of some of these alpha betas and kind of develop, test, deploy, and come back. Let's see some more questions. Storyboards. So we've done some different things with storyboards, right? And it depends a lot of times on the tool, right? So our storyboard for animation will look like, could look like an animatic, your standard, here's the visual on screen, here's the narration. To go back, we're really obsessed with this tool on online whiteboarding tools. They're really great. Like I said, we use Miraboard, there's Jamboard, but really what's cool about that is that you could get multiple roles in the room in front of the whiteboard. So you can, if it's a rapid course, you could get the client, you could have your instructional designer and your designer in the tool on video, going through the content and just running through ideas really quick and kind of putting it all together. So you could finish, a collaborative storyboard with the client and even eliminate that review cycle by using a kind of cloud-based collaborative tool and just kind of guiding the conversation and getting everybody aligned before we even hop into development. So, but there's a lot of different things out there. Some of our designers, put it in Illustrator, or, when we use Articulate Rise, we can build the storyboard right in there since it's such an easy tool to update. Let's see, do you have a dedicated QA reviewers, or is there peer review within the team? Beth, do we have a dedicated QA reviewers, or is there peer review within the teams?
No, we have dedicated QA, and for each project that we have going, there's typically always 2 QA resources assigned to that project. And, the QA team, we have multiple projects that we work on as well. So it isn't strictly dedicated to a single project. We have multiple projects across the team. But so we become quite familiar with particular clients. If we, when I'm assigning projects to folks, for those people who have worked with a client, they will stick with the client. And I try to keep at least one of them on that project just because of the history that they have. And we keep a client style guide repository just within our team, where we will, record what client likes and dislikes and those kind of things. So, for folks who want to use Oxford comma or not use, how they want to do title casing and those kind of things. So we keep track of those. So, it just gets faster and better as we go along with the client.
Yeah, great. I have a question here, and which I'm sure a lot of us feel. If you're just a one-person team, a lot of L&D departments don't have all of these resources. So if you have the ability to use contractors and freelancers, that's great. If not, and I think from that first course that we were talking about earlier, where I was, when we were a small company, one-person team building all of these parts. So if you are by yourself, I would still just think about, instead of just hopping right into the development, just breaking it up to yourself of, okay, here's the content flow, here's what I'm thinking. And if you're internally for your own company, you probably have a look and feel that maybe you use all the time. But even before just looking at all of these things in different segments, again, will kind of save you time. So when we call this Agile, it's more of a lowercase Agile, where how do you make changes more effectively and less painfully, and not getting into like either a production purgatory or, the worst thing that you could do is develop, spend so much time and effort, and then for it not to hit the mark. So it can change, right? This is something that we've adapted as creators of courses for the custom world. But yeah, even if you're a one-person team and you don't know all of these things and you're just directing other people and you're just an instructional designer, and let's say you're bringing on an illustrator or a developer, just understanding how to direct and provide the direction or the information needed for the people on the team to move this project forward.
And as they say, measure twice, cut once.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see here. Some tips for script writing. I always like to ask a couple questions on what should this course sound like? What shouldn't this course sound like? Just if you're working with a client or with a stakeholder, I like to imagine, who is the actor, right? In this human computer interaction where you don't have, a personality of a live person, ask some questions on, does this sound like, a friend in a coffee shop that's explaining to you the process? Does it need to be more formalized? Is it something that the user needs to understand, how important this information is. Like when we did that course on corruption, you know, it really needed to show that like, hey, you could go to jail, right? So it needed to kind of have that tone. So before even getting into writing, I like to just ask some of those questions, and then even sometimes just imagine, you know, a character from a movie, or, you know, who would, if they were kind of talking like this in this course, how would they sound? And then that kind of helps you to, you know, put yourself in the shoes of this character that you're really creating, because for an effective human computer interaction, it really does need to sound conversational and sound like a person that's communicating to you, and tone matters, right? Either levity or seriousness can affect if the user even takes the course seriously, or if they drown out and they, you know, find it too you know, difficult to get through.
Greg, I think we're at the end of the session, so if you want to wrap it up, you can still respond to questions in the chat afterwards.
Excellent. So yeah, I'll just end with, you know, thank you guys for inviting us into your living rooms or wherever you guys are watching these presentations. It was a lot of information. I hope some of it was useful. If there are some additional questions, I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff. I really love learning experience design. You can find me on LinkedIn, Greg Kozera. You can message me there, or I'll go through some of these comments or questions I didn't answer in the tool here. But yeah, guys, thank you guys so much. And Beth, I don't know if there's any kind of closing remarks you'd like to give?
Nope, and same for me. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to help. And if you know, send your name and you have questions, and, you know, we'll be happy to jump in there and help you.
All right.
Thank you so much, guys. Great session.